It was like a struggle of my logic interfering with my fear and emotions
I wanted to believe it so badly.
all my life, and like my family's belief and whatnot, and like, could this be
The
wrong?
foundations were crumbling.
It started shattering little by little.
I was so sad.
I freaked out.
My name's Clara, and this is Sandstone. Sandstone is a storytelling podcast that seeks to understand the nuanced worlds of Arabia and Appalachia, and the people that call these places home. Today we'll continue with our theme, Islam, a religion of 1.8 billion people and the fastest growing religion in the world. We've already met devout Muslims, Kip, Andrew, and Kafa, so to balance things out, we'll hear from Muhammad, an ex-Muslim. And for a double whammy Kinder surprise, in the second half of the episode, we'll hear a story that's strangely parallel to Muhammad's spiritual journey. A story that took place here in West Virginia. It's the story of my sister. But first, Muhammad. Now, his name isn't really Muhammad, but for the purpose of confidentiality, we decided to call him by a different name. I personally was going for something a little more edgy, something like Frodo or Barney, maybe Guadalupe. I thought Guadalupe would be so cute. But in the interest of credibility, we settled on Muhammad.
My background. I don't know why you said. Did you say that?
No, you made that up.
أنا آسف والله. Hello.
شو
أنا
الأخبار؟
أنا آسف. بس قاعد برتب أموري. أمي بتسلم عليك يا ولا شيء.
أنا بسلم عليها. His mom says hi. Everyone say, hey, Muhammad's mom. Muhammad was born in Jordan, and that's where I met him. But when he was just a mere babe, he and his family flew over the ocean and through the woods to none other than
Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain.
Sometimes when I ask him, like, Dad, why? Why Oklahoma? Like, out of all the states.
Right behind the rain.
his dad had accepted a teaching job there, and Muhammad would spend his early childhood on the Oklahoma plains, yodeling to the wind. Or at least that's how I imagine it. Muhammad's family is devoutly Muslim, and they were an active part of the small Muslim community in Oklahoma.
A lot of my social life was tied to the Islamic Society Center, which is the mosque in my town.
And even as a kid, Muhammad took his religious identity very seriously.
Even more so than the fact that I'm Jordanian, I would always want to represent the idea that I'm Muslim.
They moved back to Jordan when he was 11, and he was surprised by the reality of his homeland. And it wasn't like a fun surprise, it was the bad kind.
Growing up in America, all I know is that my family is from this place called Jordan. So then I had this image in my mind that it was like this great place, and I was excited to go there. I'm like this little innocent 11-year-old, like thinking that when I go there, like, oh, you're Jordanian, I'm Jordanian. Hey, man, this is great, man. Like, what's up?
Jordan is a Muslim country, so Muhammad assumed that his fellow Jordanians would be as devout and faithful as he was.
When I came to Jordan, people who met, and cousins of mine, don't pray 5 times a day, for example. But then I was like a disciplined little kid that would always follow the rules, so it would shock me. That was one of the biggest shocks.
And little Muhammad was disappointed in what he found.
I was in the States living amongst the non-believers, you know what I mean? I would pray in the library, and they would be like, what is this guy doing, you know? And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm a Muslim. God is watching me, and he's happy right now, you know? But then when I came here, it's like my cousins don't pray and don't care about religion because it's like their whole life, and it has no more value.
But despite this rude awakening, Muhammad continued to represent the religion that he knew to be true.
Of course, growing up in a Muslim family, naturally, what I was brought up with to be the truth was Islam. So I followed that and tried to be like the best Muslim I can be and whatnot. But then in my early 20s, I worked with the U.S. Peace Corps and lived and worked closely with Americans for 3 months. Again, I said I always like to represent what I believe in. So then I would like to start debates with my friends about religion or about sensitive topics. When I started debating people about, like, for example, men's rights and women's rights and like equality. That was like the trigger that made me start questioning religion, which was like around 6 years ago or 5 years ago.
Gender inequality is a source of contention among many Muslims. In our last episode, Imam Kip explained how inequality in Islam is just a misunderstanding. But for Muhammad, it was a deal breaker.
When I started working and meeting with like men and women from the United States, I just started seeing the flaws in my arguments personally. So like, yeah, the religious teachings in the Quran did not make sense to me anymore. Like I didn't only have in my mind logic and teachings. It was also like this belief of this God and an afterlife and a heaven and hell. You know what I mean? And that like keeps you in check always. So that was the struggle. It was like a struggle of like my logic interfering with my fear and emotions all my life and like my family's belief and whatnot. And like, could this be wrong? It's so difficult. But then the more and more I started thinking about it and digging deep, I started like looking at my whole existence in a different perspective. And then finally, like maybe after a year or two, I openly like started telling people. Of course, I selected few because people can be sensitive about this topic.
People can be very sensitive. It's not like, hey, mom and dad, I'm an atheist now. And they're like, right on, you do you, bro. Depending on the country and cultural norms, apostasy is a serious deal. Like your family might disown you or your government might sentence you to death.
You have to also understand that Islam isn't this like ultimately harmless thing. For some reason, people that probably don't know how to speak any Arabic at all confidently would come up to you and say, Islam is the religion of peace. Islam means peace. No, bro, Islam means submission. And it means to submit to God in whatever God says.
We hear this all the time. Islam is the religion of peace. But we hear the opposite too. Islam is evil. Islam is terror. So which is it?
One extreme, let's say in the States or the West, is that they hate Islam, right? And then another extreme that is as blind, in my opinion, sometimes. Some people, I realize, they try to be so liberal that they are blind to anything negative and over-apologetic about things without even knowing any facts about it. And then they could get fooled, actually. That's the funny part.
As a non-Muslim trying to understand Islam, it can be very confusing. And it's easy to fall into one of these extremes. I definitely have. But Islam is such a complex package. To him, it's justice, and to her, it's injustice. To them, it's suffering, and to them, it's healing. And to us, maybe it's not up to us. Maybe it's just our job to listen. Muhammad left Islam and hasn't gone back. And the first time he shared this experience with me, I couldn't help but feel that I had heard this story before. Of course, the details were a little off. The main characters had different names, Jesus and Allah. The settings weren't exactly the same. It was a small town in Jordan and the West Virginia countryside. But the plot is strangely parallel. Okay,
so what should we talk about?
just talk. I'm just like chat. So this is my sister.
Oh, you didn't come up with a fake name.
So just for kicks, and partly for her confidentiality, we are also going to call said sister by a different name. She shall be called Emma. I know it's boring, but it just makes more sense than my other proposed options, which were Frida, Jasper, or Ziggy. Emma accepted Jesus into her heart when she was just 6 years old. She was watching an exceptionally moving episode of VeggieTales and felt it was time to take her spirituality to the next level.
Yeah, I was 6. I took things very seriously from the womb, yes. I don't remember it as being like this big step because I think it was just like, yeah, this is what's expected of you.
If I'm not mistaken, this storyline is beginning to sound familiar.
Of course, growing up in a Muslim family, naturally, what I was brought up with to be the truth was Islam.
And I felt proud to be doing what I should be doing.
So I followed that and tried to be like the best Muslim I can be and whatnot.
As a kid, Emma's Christian family, church, and school consistently reaffirmed her beliefs.
A lot of my social life was tied to the Islamic Society Center.
Yeah, if there was going to be a youth group event, we were going to be there because we loved it and we loved God.
Emma became even more committed to her faith in high school, and she felt called to share her faith with others.
Again, I said I always like to represent what I believe in.
So in the summer of her sophomore year, she participated in a 3-week street evangelism program in Philadelphia. This was a game changer.
So this was a very evangelical group, obviously, and they had some Pentecostal beliefs as well. And one of the pretty pervasive beliefs was that it was really important to speak in tongues anytime you could in order to communicate with God.
Now, this was something that Emma had never experienced, and she wasn't even sure if it was possible.
One night, I was standing up front worshiping, and this leader came over and she put her hands on me, on my shoulder, and she said that she felt like God was telling her that tonight I was gonna speak in tongues for the first time. She started praying over me, and suddenly I started speaking in tongues, and it was super weird. It's hard to describe that experience, but it felt like the realest thing I've ever experienced. I remember my hands started shaking, and oh God. Oh my gosh, I'm okay.
You didn't tell me you were gonna do that.
I felt like in that moment, all of my doubting was gonna end because I had this experience with God that nobody could take away from me, because I knew that whatever was happening wasn't natural. It wasn't something that I'd ever really experienced before until I got to that place. And suddenly it just came out of me from the depths of my soul. And I just fell to my face and worshiped God, and it was amazing. And I remember I still have the journal entry from that night because I wanted to remember what that felt like, to just know without a doubt that this was true, because it was something that I'd been yearning for. So after going home, I remember kneeling beside my bed at night for a while, trying to have that communion with God and the Holy Spirit again, and I couldn't. I prayed so hard that I'd be able to, and it never came back. And that led me to do a little bit of research on speaking in tongues, and I read some things about how in secular tribes around the world, people will speak in tongues, and they're totally unrelated to the Jesus and God that I worshipped.
Emma never spoke in tongues again, and although she largely dismissed this experience, she held on to her faith.
I went to college, and I immediately joined 4 Bible studies because, again, that was my way of relating to people. That's what I knew, and that's the language that I spoke.
Emma was a leader in the Christian campus community. She was an active participant in her 4 Bible studies and even established her own women's group. But despite these efforts, certain doubts kept resurfacing.
I had a couple of experiences, Clara's friend Kafa would come over to our home, and she would roll out her prayer rug and she'd pray in our home.
And our plots converge yet again.
When I started working and meeting with men and women from the United States, I just started seeing the flaws in my arguments personally.
She was a Muslim woman and was also so kind and lovely, and imagining her in hell because she wasn't a Christian was something that I kind of kept coming back to.
So the religious teachings in the Quran did not make sense to me anymore.
And imagining people like her that were just awesome people being punished eternally was really hard for me to swallow.
These sorts of uncertainties and doubts kept weighing on Emma. She eventually stepped down from leadership roles in the Christian community.
It felt really uncomfortable because I felt like they were all looking to me to be a leader, and I couldn't be that anymore. But I also couldn't be inauthentic anymore. That led to just a really, really hard time in my life where I felt like the foundations that I had built my life upon were crumbling super fast.
So then it started shattering little by little.
Suddenly I couldn't relate to other Christians, and I couldn't relate to non-Christians because I'd spent my whole life hanging out with only other Christians pretty much. And so I felt very placeless. So there was about a year of sadness. It was just I wasn't really bitter towards God or Christianity or the way that I was raised. It was just I was so sad because I wanted to believe it so badly. And I didn't know what my life would look like without it.
Certain faith communities call for estrangement when a member leaves the faith. But even if you aren't physically estranged from family and loved ones, it can sometimes feel that way, and it takes time for that hurt to heal.
Yeah, it's more or less kind of strict in a family setting to practice, for example, fasting or praying or whatnot, but I'd be the only person that doesn't participate in them.
I remember talking to my dad. We were sitting at a campfire, just the two of us, and I just started sobbing and told him that I didn't think that I could believe anymore, and he didn't really offer me much advice, I don't think. He just kind of listened, and that was really nice for me. And that kind of opened up our relationship. It definitely deepened our bond because I didn't feel like I had a secret to keep from him anymore.
Even though we did have our rough times at some parts, but now they understand that I actually believe in this. It's not like a phase.
And I think that this little part of me my whole life that had wanted to please my parents and please my church and please everybody by being this perfect Christian girl, I was freed up a little bit more because I knew that my parents would accept me even if I didn't have the same beliefs that they had.
Yeah, we look beyond the belief and then we just treat each other like a family.
As the hurt healed, Emma traveled and met people from different cultures and backgrounds. She found new community and felt a freedom that she had never experienced before.
Since suddenly I didn't have that same agenda that I used to have where I wanted to approach every conversation with someone as a chance to show them Jesus, suddenly I began to learn more about them and their stories, and I realized that I didn't have all the answers and they had some answers for me.
Everyone you will ever meet knows something that you don't.
It was just a whole new level of relationship building. After I got over that first initial phase of heartbreak, it was really freeing.
I started looking at my whole existence in a different perspective.
I never thought that I could have this type of life and happiness and freedom outside of the faith. I thought that was only something that Christians experienced.
Leaving your faith is like a really bad breakup. And you're not only breaking up with your God, you're breaking up with your family, your culture, your identity, your way of life, all at the same time. I went through this once upon a time. I can't disclose how long ago, lest I give away my age. My story isn't as dramatic as Muhammad's or Emma's, but I get it. And I know how hard it is to share these deeply personal things, and how important it is that we have these conversations.
I want to tell you about a dream.
Okay.
I just want to keep talking and talking.
This is what happens when you give people microphones. They're and then let me one more story. Anything else that you want to talk about? Anything on your heart that you need to express? Your inspirations, your ambitions, your life inhibitions. I don't know anything else that rhymes with that.
My intuitions.
Your intuitions, thank you. Both Muhammad and Emma are silly people, but these things are serious.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, these are like sensitive topics, and people have to like do a lot of research and like reading and like need to be open. I can't give answers, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a big topic, and I can't claim to like be the ambassador for this kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
Religion is not one size fits all. It comes in many shapes and sizes, and sometimes it doesn't fit at all. Many Muslims would probably disagree with Muhammad, as many Christians might disagree with Emma. But I think that's the best thing about stories, because you can't deny someone the authenticity of their own personal experience, because that's their truth, and it's just as valid as yours. This project is supported in part by the Honors College at West Virginia University and the Critical Language Scholarship Alumni Development Fund. The Critical Language Scholarship is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State with funding provided by the U.S. government. Thank you for listening. All right, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, bye.